When the prostrate Protestant, when the prostrate Protestant, when the prostrate Protestant goes marching in. The Renaissance era and reforms. Through the late 15th and early 16th centuries, European missionaries and explorers spread Catholicism to the Americas, Asia, Africa and Oceania. Pope Alexander VI, in his papal bull Inter Caetera, awarded colonial rights over most of the newly discovered lands to Spain and Portugal. Under the Patronato system, state authorities controlled clerical appointments, and no direct contact was allowed with the Vatican. In December 1511, the Dominican friar Antonio de Montesinos openly rebuked the Spanish authorities governing Hispaniola for their mistreatment of the American natives, telling them, "You are in mortal sin for the cruelty and tyranny you use in dealing with these innocent people." King Ferdinand enacted the laws of Burgos and Valladolid in response. Enforcement was lax, and while some blamed the Catholic Church for not doing enough to liberate the Indians, others pointed to the Church as the only voice raised on behalf of indigenous peoples. The issue resulted in a crisis of conscience in 16th century Spain. An outpouring of self-criticism and philosophical reflection among Catholic theologians, most notably Francisco de Vitoria, led to debate on the nature of human rights and the birth of modern international law. In 1521, through the leadership and preaching of the Portuguese explorer Magellan, the first Catholics were baptized in what became the first so-called Christian nation in Southeast Asia, the Philippines. The following year, Franciscan missionaries arrived in what is now Mexico and sought to convert the Indians and to provide for their well-being by establishing schools and hospitals. They taught the Indians better farming methods and easier ways of weaving and making pottery. Because some people questioned whether the Indians were truly human and deserved baptism, Pope Paul III in the papal bull Veritas Ipsa or Sublimis Deus 1537 confirmed that the Indians were deserving people. Afterward, the conversion effort gained momentum. Over the next 150 years, the missions expanded into North America. The native people were legally defined as children, and priests took on a paternalistic role, often enforced with corporal punishment. Elsewhere in India, Portuguese missionaries and the Spanish Jesuit Francis Xavier evangelized among non-Christians and a Christian community which claimed to have been established by Thomas the Apostle. In Europe, the Renaissance marked a period of renewed interest in ancient and classical learning. It also brought a re-examination of accepted beliefs. Cathedrals and churches had long served as picture books and art galleries for millions of the uneducated. The stained glass windows, frescoes, statues, paintings and panels retold the stories of the saints and of biblical characters. The church sponsored great Renaissance artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, who created some of the world's most famous artworks. Although church leaders were able to harness Renaissance humanism-inspired arts into their overall effort, there were also conflicts between clerics and humanists, such as during the so-called heresy trials of Johann Rückling. In 1509, a well-known scholar of the age, Erasmus, wrote The Praise of Folly, a work which captured a widely held unease about corruption in the Catholic Church. The papacy itself was questioned by conciliarism, expressed in the Councils of Constance and the Basel. Real reforms during this ecumenical councils and the Fifth Lateran Council were attempted several times but thwarted. They were seen as necessary but did not succeed in large measure because of internal feuds, ongoing conflicts with the Ottoman Empire Saracens, also known as Muslims, and the simony and nepotism practiced in the Renaissance Church of the 15th and early 16th century. As a result, rich, powerful and worldly men like Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI were able to win election to the papacy. The Fifth Lateran Council issued some but only minor reforms in March 1517. A few months later, famously on the 31st of October 1517, Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses in public, hoping to spark debate. His theses protested key points of Catholic doctrine as well as the sale of indulgences. Aldrich Zwingli, John Calvin and others also criticised Catholic teachings. These challenges, supported by a powerful political force in the region, developed into what is now known as the Protestant Reformation. During this era, many people emigrated from their homes to areas which tolerated or practiced their faith, although some lived as crypto-Protestants or Nicodemuites. In Germany, the Reformation led to war between the Protestant Schmalkaldic League and the Catholic Emperor Charles V. The First 9-Year War ended in 1555, but continued tensions produced a far graver conflict, the 30 Years' War, which broke out in 1618. In the Netherlands, the wars of the Counter-Reformation were the Dutch Revolt and the 80 Years' War, part of which was the War of the Dulic Succession, also included northwestern Germany. The Cologne War was a conflict between Protestant and Catholic factions, which devastated the electorate of Cologne during 1583 to 1589. After the archbishop rule in the area converted to Protestantism, Catholics elected another archbishop, Ernst of Bavaria, and successfully defeated him and his allies. In France, a series of conflicts termed the French Wars of Religion was fought from 1562 to 98 between the Huguenots and the forces of the French Catholic League. A series of popes sided with and became financial supporters of the Catholic League. This ended under Pope Clement VIII, who hesitantly accepted Henry IV's 1598 Edict of Nantes, which granted civil and religious toleration to Protestants. In 1565, several hundred Huguenot shipwreck survivors surrendered to the Spanish in Florida, believing they would be treated well, naively. Although a Catholic minority in their party was spared, all the rest were executed for so-called heresy, with active clerical participation. The English Reformation was ostensibly based on Henry VIII's desire for annulment of his marriage with Catherine of Aragon, was initially more of a political and later theological dispute. The Acts of Supremacy made the English monarch head of the English Church, thereby establishing the Church of England. Then, beginning in 1536, some 825 monasteries throughout England, Wales and Ireland were dissolved, and Catholic churches were confiscated. When he died in 1547, all monasteries, friaries, convents of nuns and shrines were destroyed or dissolved. Mary I of England reunited the Church of England with Rome, and against the advice of the Spanish ambassador persecuted Protestants during the Marian persecutions. After some provocation, the following monarch, Elizabeth I, the daughter of Henry VIII, enforced the Act of Supremacy. This prevented Catholics from becoming members of professions and holding public office, voting, or educating their children. Executions of Catholics and dissenting Protestants under Elizabeth I, who reigned much longer, then surpassed the Marian persecutions, and persisted under subsequent English monarchs. Elizabeth I also executed other penal laws, were also enacted in Ireland, but were less effective than in England, in part because the Irish people associated Catholicism with nationhood and national identity. They resisted persistent English efforts to eliminate the Catholic Church. Historian Diarmaid MacCulloch, in his amazing book The Reformation and History, noted that although all the thought of the Reformation era emerged, the valuable concept of religious toleration and an improved Catholic Church, which responded to doctrinal challenges and abuses highlighted by the Reformation at the Council of Trent, which was from 1545 to 1563. The council became the driving force and face of the Counter-Reformation, and reaffirmed central Catholic doctrines such as transubstantiation and the requirement for love and hope, as well as faith to attain salvation. Also reformed many other areas of importance to the Church, most importantly by improving the education of the clergy, consolidating the central jurisdiction of the Roman Curia. The decades after the council saw an intellectual dispute between the Lutheran Martin Chemnitz and the Catholic Diogo de Pavia de Andrada over whether certain statements matched the teachings of the Church Fathers in Scripture or not. The criticisms of the Reformation were among factors that sparked new religious orders, including the Theatines, Barnabites and Jesuits, some of which became the great missionary orders of later years, and were sparked by violence. Spiritual renewal and reform were inspired by many new saints like Teresa of Avila, Francis de Sales and Philip Neri, whose writings spawned distinct schools of spirituality within the Church, Oratorians, Carmelites, Salesians, etc. Improvement to the education of the laity was another positive effect of the era, with the proliferation of secondary schools reinvigorating higher studies such as history, philosophy and theology. To popularise Counter-Reformation teachings, the Church encouraged the Baroque style in art, music and architecture. Baroque religious expression was stirring and emotional, created to simulate religious fervour. Elsewhere, Jesuit missionary Francis Xavier introduced the Catholic Church in Japan, and by the end of the 16th century tens of thousands of Japanese adhered. Church growth came to a halt in 1597 under the shogun Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who, in an effort to isolate the country from foreign influences, launched a severe persecution of Christians. Japanese were forbidden to leave the country, and Europeans were forbidden to enter. Despite this, a minority Christian population survived into the 19th century, when Japan opened more to outside influence, and they continued to the present day.